Hello, everyone. My name is Daniel Geffrey, and I will be covering the myth it is impossible to learn a language after puberty. So, basically, the breakdown of the myth is learning a second language after puberty is impossible. Anyone after the age of 13 can't learn a new language, and only children that are immersed in the language can become fluent. Now, why do we think this is? Well, we just think as you get older, to do anything to learn something as complex as learning a new language, that it's physically impossible to do. And that the only way you could really learn it is when you're at a young age. And I think the way this myth came about was we just assume that after a certain point, no matter how hard you try and no matter what you do, you simply cannot be fluent in it. And that myth is very much untrue. It's important to understand the very big distinction between acquire and learn. Through one of the articles, it was described as a second language acquisition is subconscious and spontaneous. It's more of a communicative situation, whereas learning is conscious and formal, such as focusing and understanding rules. Now, I paraphrased it, but basically the way that it was described is that acquiring a language is learning your first language through interactions, like family and friends. And learning a language is learning the rules, such as school. The big difference is when you're acquiring it as a child, you're learning how to speak, you're learning how all this stuff works, but you're not learning the actual specifics of it. You're just learning to actually communicate. That's why you're able to be more fluent. As opposed to learning, you have to learn all the specifics of it. You're getting into the nitty-gritty of it, all these various rules that you have to follow that you wouldn't do or worry about as acquiring it. And that's a huge difference. And we're looking at it's impossible to learn a new language. In the study, an important quote that I found was acquiring native-like pronunciation, an early start has advantages. However, when it comes to age as being an issue in this process, it's certainly not a factor. So it really doesn't matter how old you are, but it certainly doesn't make things easier for you as you get older. As we'll learn and find out, you just have to work extremely hard and be diligent in order to get to this step, or to be able to be as fluent as somebody who would have acquired it at a very young age. Now, one might be thinking, I'm extremely confused. How did we get from point A to point B? How did we go from not being able to learn the language to the reality of it being acquiring the language? Well, again, that goes to people didn't understand the difference between acquiring and learning. We just assume that they're the same thing, but when you look into it, obviously acquiring is being surrounded up by it and things of that nature, but learning it is more, you have to learn these various rules in a classroom type setting, for example. I just wanted to focus in on this specific quote and this understanding of learning the language and how effective you are if you acquired it at a younger age. With this quote, basically, they're just saying you can be more effective and your brain can master its grammar. So it's going to be a lot more difficult being more fluent when you're an adult than if you're a young child. That part can't be disputed. That's understandable. However, if you're trying to be more grammatically fluent, you definitely have to acquire it, and that has to do with being younger as opposed to learning it when you're older. I thought this was a great quote. I just wanted to reemphasize non-native languages, obviously a second language that you're learning. If you learn English, if you acquire English as a child, but you learn French, obviously that's your non-native language. So no evidence, however, supports biological critical periods for acquiring non-native languages. So again, just the emphasis that there is no evidence that basically says, biologically this can't affect you as you're learning it as opposed to acquiring it. Now, this probably doesn't need to be said, but I am going to say it anyways. With hard work and persistence and dedication, you can do it. You can learn a second language. You can learn pretty much anything as you get older. Some things may affect you, but in large part, with a lot of hard work and a lot of just dedication, you can really do anything. Whether you're old, you're a caveman, or a green alien, if you have a working brain, then you can pretty much do anything. It's just going to take a lot of hard work. That's the biggest part of this whole study, is that you really have to work hard at it, and it's a lot easier when you're a child as opposed to learning it as an adult. And of course, here are my resources that I use for my paper as well as to help me with this presentation. The biggest thing to take away is that a lot of people don't realize acquiring and learning are two separate things, especially when it comes to languages, and that anybody can learn a second language, and you could even become fluent if you're an adult. It's going to take a whole lot of work, though. You'll have to live in another country for like a year or something like that. That's one thing when I was learning how to speak French, is they said if you want to be fluent, you have to live in that part of the country, or excuse me, that part of the world, live in a country where it's just nothing but French being spoken, which basically is similar to acquiring it when you're a child. Hence, learning a second language is very difficult, but it's not impossible.